Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Molten Modular. Today I'm looking at the winter Plankton ZAPS. It's a wonderfully playful, intuitive, engaging, kind of pull you in and rattle you about type of module. It wants to play, it wants to continue ongoing, it wants to infect your entire patch with its steady pumping, the rhythmic bursts and giggles of farts and slaps and slips and sizzles. It's flipping awesome, this thing. There's so many ways you can play with it. There's so many ways and avenues and pathways into it. It does kind of one thing, while at the same time inviting all sorts of different ways to make that happen. And ways that can be run manually, can be run by a CV, can be sequenced, can be punched in, or just can be surfed through to wherever it is it wants to be. That's brilliant. What is that? I'm just fiddling with some sliders here. Now, it may seem like I'm not playing with the zaps because the zaps is down here and I'm fiddling with this, but I'm just fiddling with one of the ways that you can manipulate zaps. You can kind of do it by itself if you like, but it's more fun to feed something into it. So a sequence from somewhere, gates from somewhere, stuff that in and then start playing with it. But then, once I've got something going there that I like, I can just hit a couple of buttons and I can start fudging about with it here. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing. It's putting you in another place and you get a new load of slappy, splatty, splatty noises. It is totally tremendous. Yes, now I know that usually I would save my conclusion until the end, but I can tell you right now up front that this is a hell of a lot of fun. It's a fantastic module. It's a premium module, but it's got so many layers and possibilities to it that it really, I think, makes itself worthwhile with every inch of moduleness. So I've been thinking about how best to present this as a module, and recently Plankton have just released a bunch of videos that show you all the different features of the module, which are incredibly helpful. I would go and check those out. So I'm not really going to go into too much depth on individual the granularity of what the functions and different menus do in particular. I'm going to try to show you why it's fun, why I like it, and the sort of thing you can do with it. That seems like a better plan to me. So this turned up a couple of days before Synth East, so a little while ago now, and I knew exactly why it was going to be awesome. Just on my first play. I plugged it in. I had no idea what I was doing. I just had one sound going on. I was sending in a bunch of triggers, and I played with that one sound. I thought, this is great. Yeah, I know exactly what I can do with this. I plugged it into my live rig that I was going to take to perform live. And then I stroked my chin a little bit and thought, well, I'm sure it does a bit more than this. So I did, a little bit of research. I saw Red Mean recording a video on it and went, oh, right. No, it does a whole load more. And I looked into it and I worked out that I could plug in a sequencer which would change the slot, so change the sound as it went along with a bunch of triggers. So once I'd done that, it suddenly ballooned into this awesome percussive module that could make all sorts of squidgy sounds within my live set. And it was something that was absolutely missing. I'd been struggling to try to fill that gap with hi-hat modules and the Mobat Trinity, which is a decent sounding drum synthesizer, but I wasn't finding the excitement that I wanted. I wasn't finding the thing that could operate by itself and become a whole part of the set, so that I could just put everything else out and just play with that for a bit and then put other things back in. But what it actually did in actual fact is it ran through my whole set the whole time, just being completely flipping wonderful the whole time. And I didn't know what any of the sliders meant. I was already messed up with the envelopes. I assumed this envelope was for VCO1 and this envelope was VCO2, because that's kind of what it says on the label. But that's actually not right. They're very different and do completely different things. But I didn't know. I didn't know what the random thing did, but I just kept moving it about and something seemed to happen. And that is very much my experience with ZAPS. You keep moving things about and stuff seems to happen. Because, overall, there's an immense level and depth to the sound design you can get out of this thing. But at the same time, what you're getting out of this thing is just a series of bleeps and farts and squidges. So really, do you want to spend all your time designing each squidge that you're going to hear once every now and again through a cycle? Or do you just want to play with that stream of fantastically analog squelch that comes out and throw it about the place? That is where the fun lies. Oh, sure, if you're a deep level menu diving sort of person, then this is for you. There's lots of stuff in here that you can fiddle and fart around with. But if you are a person who likes to play on the surface, who likes to explore and cascade themselves into all sorts of noises, then this is definitely for you. I'm not making a whole lot of sense, I don't imagine, at this point, but I'm just going to try to contain my enthusiasm down a little bit, talk you through what it's all about. So, what should we call this bit? Shall I just give you a brief overview, and then I'll show you a few things that I like, and then a bit more in-depth to the, something like, we'll go along like that. Shall we we're going to make it up as we go, I think, is the key. So I'm sorry if there isn't much of an index down below, or if it doesn't really mean anything. So we're just going to jump about the place. So what is ZAPS? Well, ZAPS is a linear monophonic drum percussion module. It only has one sound at a time. What, one sound at a time? It's not a multi-channel drum machine. You can't get your cowbells going with your kicks all at the same time. No, it only does one thing. But what it's particularly good at is moving from one sound, one patch, to another patch really damn quick. So quick enough to do it in a stream of stuff. It's a digital equivalent of something like the Moog DFAM, I would say. Now, a lot of people say to me that the DFAM is the most extraordinary drum machine that was ever invented. And I believe them, but it's not something I've particularly gelled with myself. The idea, I think, is that you've got 8 steps in the DFAM, and on each one you've got modulation going so that the sound is essentially different on each beat when it goes around. This is a similar idea. It's also similar to this is not rocket science, a wobbler, which has a similar vibe going on. The wobbler perhaps is more instantly available and pleasing because of the sounds that are within it, whereas the ZAPS gives you a lot more depth and breadth to design your own, as well as a lot more of other cleverness going on, I would say. But the fundamental is the same. One noise at a time. Bash, bash, pish, bosh, wash, pish, quish. A bit like that. I mean, the sounds, you can actually play them from the keys. Hear that? No, me neither. The sounds, you can actually play them from the panel here. You know, it's a playable drum sound source all by itself, but each one of these is just a separate patch within the ZAPS. So the idea is you can play all these all at once in a row, just the one. Or more interestingly, you can move about these slots. Now, the way that ZAPS works with banks and slots and sounds and this sort of thing is that each bank contains 12 sounds, which are represented on the 12 buttons. You can send CV in, which changes the slot, therefore the sound that's being played at the time. Send in a bunch of triggers, and that's why you get this. So you can see each bank as a kit, maybe. But because you've got this movement, this cascade of sounds, different patches, far and off, it's that which gives it its movement and its excitement and its change and its brilliance within your patch, because this thing is just going on. I mean, I'm reminded greatly of the noise engineering Bassimilus Alteratus Alter, which I never really got But again, it's a similar DFAM idea where you have a sound source which you modulate, and so it's changing, and then it's triggered, and it gives you this ever-changing percussive line. This is what this is doing. This is the same sort of thing. Now, so what is it that ZAPS is going to give you that perhaps these other things don't? Well, it gives you different ways to address it. So at the moment, I've got the variegate going in. Variegate is giving me gates out of channel 2 and pitch out of channel 1. But I'm not giving it pitch. I'm modulating the slots, the different changing slots. Now, I can modulate pitch as well. In fact, you can modulate anything you like. But at the moment, that's what I'm doing. And that gives me a simple 8-step rotating, looping pattern of stuff. That's super. That's super all day long. That is. Now, there are other ways I can do that. I mean, one of the most brilliant ways that I found was using the stochastic inspiration generator, which is here alongside. I used this combination of those two things together in the gig that I did. And it was just a complete stroke of genius. Absolute genius. Because the banks in here can be assigned to one octave and 12 notes within that octave, so essentially onto 12 notes of a keyboard. Now, I might plug in a keyboard in a minute and show you that, but the stochastic inspiration generator is essentially an octave of notes sitting here, and these are all based on probability. So as I turn them up, the probability of that one firing increases, and that can control the slots, the 12 slots to the 12 notes of the ZAPS. Have you got that? Well, let me plug that in to show you. So I've got the trigger here. It's going to be controlling the trigger. That's already going. And then I've got here, which is the CV coming from these notes. Plug that into slot. Now, if I put all of these down, I got nothing going on, because that's the sort of thing the stochastic is. You have to push something up for it to happen. So now I've got a single voice going on. I've got two timings going on, 16ths and 8ths, that sort of swap in between, that you probably can't see from over there. And I'll bring this along for this bit. Okay, so as I stick one of these up, you can see that that is firing. It's firing on 16ths and the occasional 8, because that's what I sort of turned up. And that is firing the ZAPS. If I turn up another note, that will bring in another slot. Now, there's something I have to do here. There's a little bit of paperwork, bureaucracy involved in this little bit. I'm just going to have to go and change the CV assignment to change that to chromatic. So now it's receiving on 12 notes rather than a range across a range of voltage. Does that make sense? Doesn't matter at this point. I don't want to go into the mystical nature of the menu system. That's for you to find out when you get it. You know, as in at the moment, it's not important. I'm just trying to demonstrate what the heck it can do rather than getting myself tied up into the technicals. So back to this. So there's my first one, which is here, that's firing off. I can bring in the next note. Of course, there's the second one. This is the third one. Bring in another one, and it's going to start finding each note of the 12. Now, this is all based on probability of some degree. And so I'm not getting a regular looped pattern. I'm just getting whatever it is that this wants to produce, depending on whereabouts those sliders are. So as a combination, it's incredibly playful. It's incredibly interesting and explorative, because you're not just sticking stuff in, you are probabilitying stuff about the place, creating this evolving, changing rhythms. And I should probably stop talking so you can listen to it a little bit as I just give this a bit of a play. See, and the other thing you can do is change banks as you're going. So if you're not interested in those sorts of noises, go for another bank. Oh yeah, see, that's a big change right in the middle of your gig. Just drop that in. So it has a little bit of a sort of cartoon police car about it. So the important thing in what we're doing here is that we are modulating the slot choice. That is what's giving us all this change, all this rhythm. But that's not the only thing you can do in here. It's not the only way of doing it. So I've shown you the variegate going in. That's pretty good because you can select 8 things which are going round. You can do that with any melodic sequencer, essentially. Set it and that can select a slot. And one of the nice things in here is that you can change the range of voltage that's being used. So it's not just going from 0 to 10. You can also put it from -5 to 5 or to 0 to 5. So whatever sequencer you've got, whatever source of voltage you have, you can probably address all the sounds without too much bother. And the fact that it has the ability to change between range and also chromatic is pretty damn genius, because it allows this to happen, but also a keyboard to happen. Let me show you that. Right, now I've got a keyboard attached. So 12 sounds, 12 notes. Remember, it's not polyphonic, it's monophonic, so me trying to hit 2 things at once is not really going to do what we're after. But what I can do, I can go to sequence mode, for instance, on this, and stick in some kind of sequence. And see how that goes. As simple as that, and I got it running from this, and I could, for instance, because this is a transposable sequencer, I could kind of shift it so it's now playing different or a different order of slots. To some degree, new bank. See, it's brilliant. And what I love about this is that I'm like half an hour into this video and I've not even really touched the front panel. We're just playing with the slots at the moment. I haven't done any sound editing or any changes here yet. I did a little bit at one point, but not really. We're going to come to that in just a minute. But we're just having so much fun enjoying the sounds that are in there and the way they develop and the way they change when using sequencing and triggering like this. Flipping ace! You know, and then you want to change to something slightly different, you just stick in another bank. And it changes. You don't even have to change a sequence, it just changes the vibe within your track, and then you come back to what you were doing before. Oh, by golly, that's good. I do have a little bit of reverb on from the White Rabbit, just so that you know. So while we're here, while this is going, before we get into how ZAPS is actually functioning, which is interesting in and of itself, I promise, I'm just going to show you in sort of performance what you could do with what's going on. So you have the ability to change all sorts of parameters, which I will show you. I will show you in a minute. So there's lots of stuff in here. There's these sliders on the top. There's also another level of sliders with which you can start designing sounds. But you've got all these different slots and stuff going on at once. Now, the second level of genius that this has is it has the ability for you to edit the entire bank group. I think I want to call it a group. I can't remember why. But you can edit all the sounds at once. So you can imagine that you could select a slot, which you can. Oh, let's go back to this. Where were we? That I can select a particular slot and I can edit that with the front panel. Edit that patch. Yes, absolutely, you can do that. But of course, you're only hearing that every now and again. And that might be what you want to do. Who knows? You might just want to be able to change this particular sound. Is that even sounding? No, number 6 is. So let's choose number 6. Now, I promise you in there somewhere, I'm editing sound 6. It's just quite hard to discern that. And that's, in some ways, that's part of the trouble that you find yourself in ZAPS, is you get lost in trying to find something that you're trying to edit when actually you want the whole thing to evolve. Okay, so to do that, I hit function and edit group. Now, whatever I do affects every single slot. So for instance, I could pump up the release. So all of them are now releasing longer. Or I can bring that down so it's a lot tickier. Now at the moment I'm on absolute mode, which means I'm moving all of the parameters the full whack. You can also set it to relative mode, where you just move everything relative to each other, which is a little perhaps less dramatic, but perhaps more nuanced, gentler. It brings in subtler changes, which perhaps is what you might be wanting. But I can do other things too, obviously. So that's everything zapping. I need more of a release on that. There we go. Then you can hear everything's been pitch enveloped. In that way. Bring the mix up. And then brilliantly, I can just tap the encoder and it all goes away. Back to where we were originally. So that is hopefully giving you an inkling of why this is so playful. Is that not only can you get it this waterfall of sound coming out, but you can get in there and you can play with all of it. I mean, in a chaotic live performance, that's a fantastic place to be able to play. And as a module, it's big enough and light enough for you to get in there. You can see the LEDs and the sliders, you can grab them. Even if you don't really know what they are, you kind of get an idea as you move it about that it's doing something interesting. Oh, it's just flipping ace. You can also create a snapshot, create a freeze point, a point that you really like, hit freeze, and then you can come back and recall that later. Just the one, mind. But you can also save snapshots essentially into another bank to create your own bank of slots. It's just too good. That's the problem. It's just too good. So we need to talk about what it is in actuality. The synthesis, the synthesizer behind the gloriousness that is the playful heart of ZAPS. Oh, all right then. Let's talk about that. Shall I bring you in? Shall I bring you in so you can see it from a couple of different angles? Maybe that's good. Okay, let's look at it slightly differently. Let's look at it as a synthesizer, which is what it ultimately is. I'm going to take out of the slot messing about, and I'm going to put that into the voltage per octave input. So I can now play it like a synth. Is the idea. Now, another of the many cool features is that I can just tap this and it clears the slot and just gives me the simplest of sounds. No, it hasn't done that though, has it? Well, let's go to another bank. Bank 1. Bank cleared. Oh shit. Oh, I accidentally cleared the bank. Didn't really mean to do that, but hey, never mind. I never liked bank 1 anyway. So as I was saying, if you just tap and hold that, it will clear the slot for you, giving you just the basic oscillators. So the layout within the ZAPS is that you have got 2 analog oscillators. Now everything is digitally controlled. That's why it can do all the cleverness that it's doing. But ultimately, you've got 2 triangle core voltage controlled oscillators inside. You've got the level on both of them on these sliders here, VCO1, VCO2 mix. And you can see on the screen here that they're both currently tuned to different things. They've got their own coarse and fine tuning. This is supposed to be a C. Let's call it C3, shall we? Now, the way that it's set up is that VCO1 is essentially your main oscillator, VCO2 is your modulation oscillator. Carrier, modulator. I suppose you could see it in FM terms, or you can just play them as they are. If I find myself into the right thing over here and go to that, which then goes to that, which then goes... I mean, one thing I would just like to point out, but just one annoyance, just for you Plankton Winter guys, over here on the screen, is when you're assigning CVs, you can't see what it's assigned to. So the first page you go to, I've got CV3, and I can change to all the different CVs, but I have no idea what it's assigned to, and that's really annoying. To get to see what it's assigned to, I have to go to the next page. So I find that immensely frustrating. I mean, I kind of know what it is that I'm looking for, so I'm on CV3 because I know that this is slot 3 and this is the voltage octave one, although they can be assigned to anything, which is why having it alongside it, what it is assigned to, would be enormously helpful in navigating this thing. Anyway, so I'm going to go CV3 to the next page, which is the group page, which is why it's in a different page, but I don't really understand what groups are, but I think you can put banks into groups or something, but it doesn't matter, not important. But as you can see, that this is set to VCO1 course. So I'm going to go down, if I can remember how, like that, and then select that. I'm going to make it to VCO1 and to course. Okay, to enact it, you have to then tap the thing. If it's highlighted, it's not on until you've tapped the thing, and then it should work. We've now got both VCOs following the keyboard. Yeah? A little bit of fine tuning. I could do some detuning. Now let's make the release a little bit longer. There we go, lovely. Now each one has different waveforms. You can see it's all set to sine waves at the moment. If I go to VCO1 and put it onto the second layer by pressing the layer button, this now transforms this front panel into the orange writing rather than the white writing. And now I can change the waveform. Now you may notice my little arrows moving about here and not actually doing anything. It's because at the moment I'm on sort of pickup mode, so I have to go through the actual parameter that it's on in order to pick that up. And you may find that that's quite usefully represented by the brightness of your LEDs here. If it's bright, it's right on it. If it's not bright, it means it's far away from what it should be. If it was set to the right parameter, it should be set to. As in, this is digital, so as soon as you change page, none of this makes any sense to what it did previously, and you can move things about and it will no longer represent visually what it is that's happening on the other page, obviously. But these LEDs help me find where it was that was. So yeah, if I move a fader, it will light up when you get to the right parameter that was actually saved on. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. So waveform, I can change to, once I've picked that up, gone through it, now I can come back up and I've got triangle, sawtooth, square, and of course I've got pulse width modulation, as well as you can imagine. I can do exactly the same for the other VCO. Now the other VCO has two waveforms. First one is for FM, which we'll look at in a second. The second one is for AM. So you've got two different forms of modulation from VCO2 into VCO1. You can either go FM or you can go AM. So amplitude modulation is changing the volume very, very fast, generally, not necessarily. Frequency modulation is changing the frequency really fast, although not necessarily. You can also cross modulate 1 into 2 just to be extra awkward. But what I was trying to point out is that you can have different waveforms for each. The other thing you can have on VCO2 is noise. Very percussive, as I'm sure you'll agree. So what I could do with the oscillators is essentially set them to something like sawtooths and make a nice kind of juicy saw. If I bring in the second VCO so we hear them playing together. So if I send in an arpeggiation, I can then detune tune those nicely. Or offset them. I have an inbuilt envelope with both release and attack. But of course this is not necessarily designed for this, although I could be running this through a filter and be having a lovely time. I mean, that's one aspect. You could just pull this out and use it as a nice juicy dual oscillator sound source. But this is for percussion, and so you've got weird things like pitch envelopes, which of course is where the zap comes in. So that's the general idea, that there's actually a lot of fun to be had with just that. You've got these two envelopes here. One is, I believe, dedicated to the modulation and the pitch, and the other one is dedicated to the VCA. I always assumed that attack 1 and release 1 went for VCO 1 and attack 2, release 2 went for VCO 2, but that's not actually the case. It's slightly more complicated and yet more obvious than that. But these two sliders here pile the envelope into the pitch of either the first oscillator or the second oscillator. Most of these things really get revealed through trying it out rather than reading the labels, which aren't always as helpful as I think they should be. But you get the hang of it. The second half of all this is all about the modulation. So how can you get that to go? So if we go back to something simpler again, gives ourselves a bit of release. And we bring up the FM. This should be directing the second oscillator into the first one. With FM. And AM. Oh, so not a whole lot's going on, but that's because you need to start adjusting other things. So this is AM. Then if you bring the cross modulation back through, it adds other tones, other textures, and really squeezes the heck out of things. And of course you can change the waveform to be something more grizzly, and you'll start to find other tones, other sounds that you weren't necessarily expecting, like sort of kick drummy stuff. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you can do. I also got confused with layers, which is something that happens. You find yourself, because there's this layer button that switches between the first layer, which is the white, and the orange layer. You turn it on to change something, and then you accidentally leave it and find yourself playing around and changing the wrong thing and convincing yourself you're hearing something that you're not necessarily hearing, or not hearing quite what you thought you were hearing. But that is kind of the inevitability of a multi-layered digital module. It's there. It's something that we have to either work around or wrestle with or soften our way into, or just learn the damn thing better in order to not find ourselves in those kinds of calamities. But it depends on what you're doing. If you're sound design and trying to find something, every accident is usually an interesting one. And that's certainly what we find. But suffice to say, in the sound design side of it, 2 analog oscillators, multiple waveforms. You've got FM of crossing 2 into 1, you've got cross modulation of 1 into 2, you've got amplitude modulation as well. You also have a high pass filter in here, you have mixing of the 2 waveforms, you've got envelopes which then turn into pitch, which give you a lot of scope, a huge amount of scope to find the particular splat, squelch, giggle or tickle that you are after. So are we done yet? No, not entirely. There's a couple of other interesting ways to play. And the first one of those is Morph. Now this can be done as a group or can be done individually. If I bring up another bank of interesting things. If I take the keyboard away so it doesn't tempt me into trying to play it like a synthesizer, let's use the stochastic again as our source of fun. So triggers into the trigger thing. Let's just go for a trigger at the moment. So we're going to pick a sound, any sound. That'll do. Now Morph is here, it's on the orange, so I've got to have the layer on. And then with a bit of luck, if I go through it, it'll morph into another sound. It's that simple. So essentially, if you have a single sound going in, you can DJ your way to another sound, and as it's morphing, it changes all the parameters. It's not just mixing from one sound to another, it's pulling all of the parameters through to the next thing. Now you can have a whole bunch of these going, and you can make the morph thing happen over the entire group. So if I put this back into slot duty, I should be able to go to edit group and then use morph, layers on, so we've now moved to a completely different bank. Well, I think So that's another great way of during performance, is just to change to something else. Rather than selecting a different bank, you can morph to one, because you can find spaces within the banks. Now within the morph settings, you can set what slots you want to go to what slots. So the morphing appears to happen within the same bank. But I don't know, you can look that bit up. So it is a source of endless variety. Another thing that we can do is random. Now you can hit a button that randomizes the patch, and that's all very well, that's all good, but you've got an actual level of random to which you can assign every single parameter. Okay, so I've selected this slot that's currently playing back. What I can do is add randomness to all sorts of things and bring that in as change. So this is the random slider here. If I go to function random, I can set what parameters I want to be involved in that. So I can stick the release up, for instance. Come back to here. Increase the random. And that's now including this release fader in that. So now the interesting thing is that I'm just pumping in a single trigger. In fact, I don't even need to use the slot CV. I could just be triggering whatever it is that I selected. And I'm getting this randomized, changing, evolving sound. And I can also morph that. So you've just got so many different ways to play. And this is all playing one slot. I'm only playing one sound. I'm just messing with the patch, and also I've got randomization up so that it's feeding it different parameters all the time. So is that like enough of Zaps to give you an idea of as to what it's about? Because as I say, out of the box, it's this immensely fun, partially intuitive, I would say, because you can stumble your adventure through it. Percussive stream of noises and splats and slaps and giggles. And it's a whole load of fun, and you can just drop it in there, pump stuff into it, and then just go to town on this evolving rhythm of clangs and clashes and sweet notes and points. But you can also then dig down and do all sorts of strange things. You can play with this interface for hours, just finding weirdness. And building your own banks. But let's go back to where we started, which is with the varigate. So that's giving me not pitch, slots, and this is giving me triggers. So I'm going to go to another sensible bank, like let's go for bank 12. And I'm instantly back into Funland again. I can just hit edit group. I'm having a good time again. I can go to my note thing here and change the rhythm. But I've also got to remember that I'm now in chromatic mode, so this is going to behave slightly differently. So I probably need to go back into CV assign. Need to go back down to number 2, back across to the thing to here, put it to there, then go back to range. And that gives me much better control over here now. I mean, potentially, the only thing that's missing, I would say, is that why can't I just get it to randomize its own slots? Why couldn't I pump in just a little sequence within this itself? Why couldn't I go, and then that would loop? Otherwise, as I say, there are levels of digitalness that you will get lost in. It's inevitable. It happens to us all. Nothing to be ashamed of, I don't think. And I don't think that detracts away from the usability, because even if you're just playing with the wrong layer on the wrong front panel, you're still going to be making sounds. And because everything is moving so fast, you don't necessarily really tune into the fact that you're doing it all completely wrong. But what ultimately I come to after all of this messing about is that just making this video, I've had a whole load of fun exploring new things, pushing it into different places, finding other things, and all of that you can do kind of on stage in a set, because it's very, very forgiving. You've just got stuff going through it, and if you get stuck, you can tap the thing and that will bring you out, or you can load another bank and that will bring you out of whatever mess you've gotten yourself into. So it can be very useful way of filling space, if nothing else. Just have that running, turn it up when you've run out of other things to do, play with that for a bit, and then bring some other things around it. I mean, I've often paired it with the Mandrake, which is the kick drum thing over here, which is phenomenal. Spoiler on that one, on that review coming soon. But something which you can regularly stick in, which kind of glues it all together, is no bad thing. Because this can absolutely do kick drums, and you will find it in there, but you won't necessarily find it at the right place where you think it should be, putting it on the right beat where perhaps you would have thought it could be. So sometimes perhaps you could say that finding the individual sounds in there can be a little bit troublesome or time consuming or fiddly, frustrating even. But then I don't really think that's what it's for. You are bundling together a bunch of different sounds and finding a groove and a vibe through the manipulation of those. You're not trying to do kick snare, hi-hat, open hi-hat, cowbell. Not really. I mean, you could, but not really. I don't think that's its vibe particularly. So having something like a kick drum underneath, providing the basis on which everything else kicks, I think is a brilliant idea. I think that's plenty. I think that's plenty on the Zaps for now. I've got a couple of demo videos out also in the channel which you might be interested in seeing. One of them is melodic, one of them is more going through the banks. And this is undoubtedly going to be kicking around a lot because I get such a kick out of it. So you'll see a lot more of this in videos to come, I imagine. So there you go. The Zaps from Winter Plankton. Plankton Winter. I hope that was useful. In the meantime, go make some tunes.